How do I recover? Like this. No, it's a question I get asked quite a lot about how I recover. I think it's also the biggest difference for me of being an age grouper and being a pro, of like what I've focused on and what I've made a priority, and I guess what I've had more time to do, which is recover. My biggest sort of, I guess, tip / thing I do to recover is sleep. It's definitely like the biggest lifestyle change that I've made. And part of that is because obviously I've been able to make it because I'm working less, so I'm not fitting everything in. It's the one thing that a lot of people underestimate it or kind of feel like they have no choice to prioritize it. But for me, it's definitely the thing that makes the most difference as to kind of how I feel, how I train. So I'm quite disciplined now about trying to be in bed somewhere between 9:30 and 10 and trying to be asleep by 10. And most days I'm getting up at 7:30, so that's a pretty good block of at least time in bed. I think on average I'm probably sleeping like 8.5 to 9 hours a night, which is like a lot more than I was. So sleep is key. The other one that I would say is also very important is nutrition. I think, again, quite an obvious one. Lots of people talk about it. Mainly for me, it's about eating properly. So I guess like nice and balanced, having like a good general mix of like home cooked food, like you know what you're cooking. I like to have a good mix of like veg, carbs, meat, fish, all that kind of stuff. But alongside that, obviously, I also love chocolate and a bit of wine. So I have a bit of that thrown in. The thing that I found from a nutrition point that also really helps me is like being properly fueled for sessions. So on my easier swims during the week, I don't really eat before, mainly because if I've eaten well the night before, I don't really feel the need to. But for the hard swims, like I will try and eat something like a banana with some peanut butter or a bit of toast or something, just to kind of make sure I've actually got that extra bit of energy to go hard. Hydration and caffeine. I mean, caffeine is something that I just have quite a lot of. I like coffee, I like tea. I drink a lot of both of them. So I wouldn't say I use caffeine in a particularly scientific way. I will usually have a couple of caffeine gels that I have ready to take towards the back end of a race if I feel I need it. But I actually also don't want to rely on caffeine in a race that much, because I've also found that can be the thing that upsets my stomach if I try and take caffeine during a race. So yeah, I don't use it racing that much. I will generally have a coffee before a hard bike or run session. I wouldn't have a coffee probably after 4. But again, like not like super scientific or strict on it, but 4:01. But yeah, but that's also probably more because I wouldn't really necessarily be doing any hard sessions much later than that, because I tend to not do that well trying to do stuff in the evening. I would have tea later than that. So yeah, I'm not super strict on sort of caffeine and when I take it. I don't think I'm super sensitive to it, so I don't actually think like I could have a cup of tea at 9:30 and still be able to go to sleep by 10. I guess like I try and like make sure I'm taking stuff in post some of the long sessions. So like I got back from a long ride today. I had a big bowl of yogurt with granola and peanut butter. But generally, yeah, my thought is if you're eating lots of proper food, probably doing all right. And then obviously for the key sessions, taking on kind of specific race nutrition and making sure you're well fueled up for that. The other thing from a recovery perspective that I found quite helpful is using some of the products that can kind of, I guess, help speed up recovery or just help with if you don't have access to like a masseuse or stuff like that. So Maya Master have got a range of stuff that I've been using quite a lot. One of them is their compression tight. Again, that would be more on a like day like today where I've come back from a long ride, get feet up in the tights, half an hour of kind of sitting around doing nothing. And it just helps with kind of getting the blood flowing and a bit of extra recovery. The other thing that also is really helpful, I find, is like their little Myo gun. The Myo Pro is the Myo Pro gun. But yeah, with the gun, again, if I've got like specific little niggle or something that's a little bit tight, I can use that to get in there. And also on some of the areas that I know are just like a bit more of a problem area for me, like I've got really high arches, so I tend to like using it on my feet quite a lot. I guess I've also been taking the CBD Triathlete ISO drop. Again, for me, that's actually linked to the first point that I think is the most important, sleep. For me, taking the ISO drops helps me sleep like a bit deeper and better, I think. So that's been really good. And then on top of that, I've also been using some of their balms and lotions, kind of again, post a hard session or just if my legs are a bit tired, put that on before going to sleep, and that seems to help speed up recovery a little bit. The other thing that I got recently, I got it probably back in November, bought myself an Aura ring. I was partly interested in looking at HRV, but also I'd heard that it was quite good at detecting early signs of illness. And so I found that really helpful. Like I like looking at the data of what was my average heart rate overnight, where is my HRV, how does it think I'm recovering? A lot of the time looking at, does that tie in with how I actually feel? So I don't think I've not really had a situation. Well, I've had a few situations where it seems to think I've not slept very well or I've not recovered very well, but actually I feel really good, and I tend to ignore it unless there's something else going on. So like it actually picked up when I had COVID. It picked up like my massively elevated body temperature and my decreased respiratory rate. So I guess like for me, body temperature and respiratory rate are kind of key illness indicators that I would pay attention to. Although again, interestingly, the body temperature is one that as a woman that fluctuates throughout the month anyway, but actually it's clever enough to pick that up. So also like you can obviously enter when your cycle is, so it'll kind of say, oh, your body temperature is a bit elevated, but it's probably due to where you're at in your cycle, which is quite helpful to know. I'm not really using it to do anything different, but I find it a kind of extra piece of, I guess in some ways it's made me a little bit more on top of making sure I'm in bed by a certain time and actually really focusing on sleep, because that's definitely the one thing that it, like if you have that bad night's sleep or less sleep than you should be getting, it like massively sways your recovery. And also it is quite interesting seeing the effects of alcohol on it, like just in terms of like how long it takes for my heart rate to stabilize overnight and how I sleep. Like I definitely, depending on how much, if I've had more than one glass of wine, then I think I can see that my sleep is not quite as like deep and solid. So good to know for if I'm in like a really big block that alcohol's not going to help past a glass.